Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. It's lovely to see you all. Um, my name's Harry. I'm the director here at Smart Clinic. And it's lovely to see you, lovely to meet you, kind of, in a funny sort of way. I do recognize a few of the names on this list as well. So thank you very much to those who I've spoken with before who've joined us, and to those who are new to Smart Clinic and maybe haven't used us, or maybe we've not spoken in the past, then a big welcome to you guys as well. Um, So today's session, it's relatively short. We try to keep things sort of short and snappy. We'll definitely keep it to within half an hour. It might even be a little bit less. But today we're going to focus primarily on when to use occupational health services, whether they're internal or external, and also kind of arguably more importantly, why you would be using them as well. I do try and make reference to kind of case law and tribunals and other common laws as well as we go along. I'm not a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination, but within the world of occupational health, we do try and focus everything we do around kind of legal history, particularly obviously tribunals in our world. So I will make a reference to a few of those as we go along as well. From my point of view, kind of the big ask that I would have from your point of view is if you've got any questions at all, anything that you would like to cover, any interesting topics you might like us to cover in the future, please stick them in the chat. It's really useful for me to gauge your feedback, but it also gives us a bit of a talking point at the end. I'll leave kind of 5 or 10 minutes at the end as well for us to try and cover off a few of these questions, or maybe kind of maybe take a bit of inspiration about any future topics that we've got going on as well. So, without further ado, let's get cracking with it. I'm hoping you can all see my screen. I'm not necessarily as technically competent as I could be with these things. So, if for any reason you can't see this presentation or things aren't appearing as they should, please do stick a message in the chat thing, and I'll be able to see as we go along. So, briefly, just by way of introductions, for those of you who don't know us, we're Smart Clinic. We are an occupational health provider, and more recently, and very flatteringly, we are also the chosen occupational health provider for the HR Ninjas. We're very pleased about that because the main reason that we've been selected is based on all of the recommendations and feedback that you lovely people have put about us on the Facebook group. So, we got approached to be the partner, and very understandably we accepted, and here we are. So we're here to discuss all things occupational health. If you don't use us and you've got no intention of using Smart Clinic at any point in the future, that is absolutely fine. We're just here to help. So please don't be shy to ask questions or fire anything at us, either now or on the Facebook group, or just directly if you would prefer as well. There are my personal contact details on this slide if you need them as well. And I will always endeavour to get back to you promptly myself, or if I'm not the right guy for you, then I will certainly get an answer from the person who is. Anyway, enough about me and enough about us. Let's talk about you guys. So, being part of HR Ninjas kind of stands to reason that the majority of the people who are on this call today will be in the HR profession. So, if you look at what that can entail, that can be anything from recruitment to employment contracts to grievances to disciplinaries to onboarding to offboarding to performance management to annual leave, sick leave, pay rises, rewards and benefits, inclusion, just about anything. In fact, bizarrely, it even has become your job to refill the paper towels every time Jane comes and tells you that the loos have run out of paper towels downstairs. So, really, you're less the HR department and more the everything department. That's certainly my experience of it. Now, that's all lovely. It's terribly hard work, but it's lovely and it's interesting and it's very varied for you guys. But being the everything department also means that you have to deal with a situation when somebody wanders into your office and says, hello, my name's John, and I've recently been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. Now, what do you do? Well, of course, you might feel very comfortable dealing with employment contracts. You might say that very much falls within my remit. You might feel very comfortable dealing with people's annual leave allowances, but are you really the right person to be dealing with somebody who's been diagnosed with OCD and anxiety, or perhaps muscular dystrophy, or perhaps rheumatoid arthritis, or any of these medical conditions? Well, it's probably safe to assume that of all of the people on this call today, your specialisms lie far more in human resources and employment law and those sorts of matters than they do in medicine and health and clinical matters. Nevertheless, it is still arguably your job to deal with these things. Well, that's where occupational health comes in, and that's where companies like us really become invaluable to organizations such as yourself. Probably, I would like to think most people on this call do have access to occupational health already in one way or another. Obviously, if you don't, then come and talk to us, but I imagine most of you do. Hopefully, you're very happy with the occupational health provision that you've got. But there's always the question as to whether actually you're using it in the best way that you possibly can do. Are there perhaps improvements that you could make in your processes that determine when to use occupational health? That's also when not to use occupational health as well. It's that you might be able to cut a few costs by only using it at the appropriate time and perhaps not at inappropriate times. Also, to determine when you're going to be using occupational health, we probably need to focus on why. Why might you be using occupational health? Because really it starts with that to sort of understand when is going to be the most suitable time for you to be making referrals or accessing the occupational health service. Um, so when we look at this, we're really talking about subject matters like things like fitness for work and reasonable adjustments. Now, these are quite big topics, and we're only really going to touch on these fairly lightly today because we actually have completely separate webinars that we have planned for later in the year that go into these in much more detail. But typically, these are the things that occupational health get used for. I am going to come back to these 2 points. Let's start with what it is that you might be looking to achieve from occupational health and probably what some of the more common objectives are. Well, I would probably say the number one objective tends to be to reduce absences. By reduce absences, we're talking about preventing absences from ever happening in the first place. We're also talking about shortening the length of any absences that you do currently have. In other words, getting people to return back to work sooner. And also preventing any recurrences of absences in the future, either for the same reason or related reasons, or possibly a different reason, although that's a little bit less likely. Um, Also, you might be looking to actually ensure that the workforce that you have, or a particular member of staff that you have, are actually clinically able or medically able to do the job that they have. That's a really important point. It's a very basic point, but it's a really important one. Is your staff actually well enough to do this job, both temporarily and permanently? Um, they're kind of the more employee-centric reasons. There's also, of course, employer-centric reasons as well. You are very practiced at this, and you are far more practiced than I am at this, but you have two people that you're representing. You have the employees, but you also have the businesses or organizations that you work for as well. And you're there to protect the organizations that you're working for just as much as the employee. So you also have to ensure that you're fulfilling your duty of care, obviously from an ethical point of view. You want to do right by the employees, but also from a legal point of view, you need to make sure that you're protecting your employer as well by sort of keeping them on the right side of the law and ensure that they're doing all of the appropriate things to be supporting the employees, whatever they may be. Again, we'll come back to what sort of things they could be a little bit later. And that involves protecting your business as well, or your organization, or school, or charity, or whomever it is that you guys are working for. Of course, there's legislation around this. You'll be very familiar with these legislations. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999, two very famous examples. Or what about the Equality Act? You might be thinking at this moment as well. Big topic. We're going to touch on it a little bit later, but we'll come back to that one. Um, and of course, there is plenty of case law about this, and there are plenty of employment tribunal rulings. One particularly interesting one that was quite a hot topic within our world, the occupational health world, was Mrs. Linsky versus Direct Line Trading as Aviva. This was from 2021. This particular instance, and this is very much about performance management. This is a very interesting tribunal ruling and one that we can all learn quite a lot from. So, to give you a very quick overview of this, Mrs. Linsky was suffering from menopause symptoms. She was going through the menopause, and she was struggling with the symptoms of it. The primary symptoms were tiredness, lethargy, brain fog, and struggling with concentration, short attention span, and poor concentration. As a result, she worked in a call center, and as a result, her performance was significantly dipping at work. It wasn't there were some absences, but it wasn't primarily an absence problem. It was a performance problem. Um, Now, Aviva basically immediately went down the route of performance management. Um, yes, sharp intake of breath. I can feel it virtually. But they went immediately down the performance management route without exploring any medical factors beforehand. Now, you don't need me to tell you the tribunal probably is the outcome of this is probably fairly clear to you, but the tribunal found in favour of Mrs. Linsky. But what they made very explicit in the ruling was that Direct Line of Eva should have gone down the route of supporting Mrs. Linsky with her health related challenges before going down the performance management route. Now, they didn't say that it was wrong to go down the performance management route. All businesses have employees, and all employees need to perform to an acceptable standard. But it's not the first port of call, particularly if somebody potentially could be struggling as a result of health issues. This is extremely relevant. We're going to reference this again in a few moments. Another very interesting tribunal ruling was Mrs. Hutchinson versus Asda Stores. This was a very sad case of a lady who was struggling with early onset dementia. She was struggling to make it to work. She was getting the wrong buses to get to work. And when she was at work, she just worked in a supermarket store, stacking shelves and working on checkouts and things. But when she was at work, her performance was sporadic and a bit random. But the bigger issue was she would get lost on the way to work and things like that. Now, her line manager, with absolute sincerity and in an attempt to be kind, suggested to Mrs. Hutchinson perhaps she might just want to retire. Maybe it's time to hang up the apron and retire. Again, probably a sharp intake of breath from our more experienced HR colleagues on this call, because we're already flagging things like, are we talking about constructive dismissal? What the tribunal found was actually that they had discriminated against Mrs. Hutchinson on the grounds of both age and disability. Incidentally, I should have mentioned in the previous case with the Mrs. Linsky versus Direct Line, there was also considered to be sex discrimination there because of the menopausal symptoms. In this instance, it's age discrimination as well because of the insinuation of retirement. So a bit of a triple whammy, this one. Now, the line manager wasn't trying to be mean. They weren't trying to be. They weren't trying to discriminate against the individual. It was inadvertent discrimination. They were just trying to be kind, but in reality, what they should have done is sought medical advice and medical input before making any suggestions or decisions regarding Mrs. Hutchinson's employment. So the lesson we learned from both of these, and of course other tribunal cases that are very similar to this, is that supportiveness and clinical intervention is your first port of call before you go down performance management or other employment related decisions, if there is any possibility that there could be a clinical background or clinical explanation to the situation that's going on. Now, there might not be a clinical background, and it might not be at all in any way relevant to the person's health. Obviously, that's not what we're talking about here. But if there is any potential that someone's health could be involved in this, then occupational health is your first port of call with things like that. So in answer to why, it's to protect your organization, but it's also to protect the employee's rights as well. Now, I did promise that we were going to talk about the Equality Act. Under the Equality Act, and you'll be almost certainly very familiar with this, if a member of staff has a disability that is covered by the Equality Act, this means that they have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on their ability to do normal daily activities. If they are considered to be covered by the Equality Act, then you as an employer have an obligation to implement reasonable adjustments for that employee. That includes potentially supporting the employee. We don't have time to go through the Equality Act in a lot of detail. We certainly don't have time to go through reasonable adjustments in tremendous detail. We're going to do an entirely separate session on that. If this is a subject matter that interests you, I would definitely recommend jumping on that as well. We'll also keep that one to half an hour. It's a very interesting topic, but just bear that one in mind for now. So there's a little bit of background on why. That's common sense, but of course also provides some legal background as well. That's the why. Now let's talk about when. So I'm going to put all of these up on the slide so that you can see them all at the same time, actually. When is often a more contentious issue because it also has a budget question involved as well. I'm going to be realistic here. No one has an unlimited budget. No one expects you to have an unlimited budget. You're not going to be referring every single employee every single day of the week. You probably couldn't afford to do that. But you do need to make a decision as to when it is worth it and when is the right time to refer an employee to occupational health. Well, as we've already established, if an employee is displaying any form of health condition in the workplace, or moreover, they declare a health condition, it's very important to get them to get some medical advice on that. You yourselves are not clinicians, I will assume. You're probably not doctors or nurses. And therefore, it's probably not your role to be determining what the employee needs and what is going to be best for their recovery or for managing their clinical condition moving forwards if there is no prospective recovery from it. It's quite an interesting tribunal ruling. I must confess, I only came across this about a week ago, this particular tribunal ruling, so I'm not as au fait with it as I am with the others, but it really struck a chord with me. It's anonymous, it's just A Limited versus Z. But the general gist of this is that Z was hiding symptoms of a fairly severe mental health condition from their employer, and they didn't wish to disclose them. Their employer went down the performance management and ultimately the dismissal route with Z, and when questioned on it within the tribunal, and this all went all the way to the appeal, by the way. When questioned about it in the tribunal, they said Z was very clearly hiding his or her conditions. They didn't wish to discuss them, they didn't wish to disclose them, and they didn't wish for any support in them. So they never would have engaged in occupational health anyway, so we didn't even bother to make a referral. Well, they've made an assumption there, and what they've also not done is they've not made all reasonable efforts to support A, because they've not actually given, sorry, Z, they've not given Z the option to engage in occupational health there. They've just made an assumption. They should not have done that. They should have referred Z and then made it Z's decision as to whether he or she wished to engage in occupational health. Had Z have chosen not to engage in occupational health and never given consent, it wouldn't have cost A Limited anything anyway. So it's not a cost issue, it's not a budget issue, it's not a finance issue. It was, to be honest, just a bit of laziness. And therefore, A Limited were found to have discriminated against Z on the basis of disability because they didn't make reasonable endeavours to find out more and indeed support Z as they needed to. So if an employee declares a health condition, or even if they don't, but they just display the symptoms of a health condition, get them referred into occupational health to find out a little bit more and ensure that you're doing everything that you can or should be doing as an employer that you would constitute to be reasonable. So much the same reason when an employee is underperforming at work as well, and there's a possibility that that underperformance is linked to a health condition, just like we observed with Mrs. Linsky and Aviva when she was underperforming as a result of her menopausal symptoms. If the underperformance potentially could be linked to a health condition, explore the health condition first before you explore the underperformance. Very important. Obviously, when we say it out loud now, it sounds like common sense, but quite often that is actually, it's almost like it's done the opposite way around with organisations. Not for any malicious reasons, it's just they address performance before they've addressed health. You'd be best advised to do it the other way around. When an employee starts a new job as an important use of occupational health, this is a very contentious one. I've seen some very mixed views. I've done quite a lot of research in the chats on the Facebook group, the HR Ninjas Facebook group, and I've seen a lot of mixed advice about this. I've seen some very questionable advice about this as well, actually. So we've decided to run an entirely separate session about this. It's a service that different people will call different things, but new starter health assessments, pre-employment health assessments, pre-placement health screenings, lots of different names for the same thing. But basically, we're talking about some kind of fitness for work check for a new employee. Um, this is really important to do. It's really important that you use an occupational health provider for it if you do choose to do it. It's also extremely important you don't try and do it yourself and make clinical decisions yourself. I will go into this in a lot more detail because I appreciate it's a contentious issue and I appreciate there will be people who disagree with me on this matter. I'm going to run a separate session to provide some evidence and some case law, and also some data protection information about that particular one as well. Absences, this is probably the most well understood and most commonly used time that you would refer to occupational health. You would always be best advised to have trigger points in your absence management policy, and those trigger points determine when you would refer to occupational health. This just prevents any kind of anti-selection or any kind of inadvertent discrimination in terms of the fact that you've referred one person but you've not referred another person. Common trigger points would be things like 3 absences within a 12-month rolling period or 3 absences within a defined rolling period, whatever you choose. Another common one could be 7 days, sorry, 5 days or more of absence, so a week or more of absence within a defined period. Another one could simply be someone has declared a medical condition in any circumstance and you would like to refer them to occupational health. Whatever it is, if you have clearly defined trigger points for referring to occupational health, either absence related or otherwise, that's going to help you and it's also going to give you a little bit of clarity. Clearly, you need to be realistic with those trigger points because there might be a concern over the fact that using occupational health 5 times as much is going to increase your cost fivefold as well. And you don't want to be spending unnecessarily, but if you can define some sensible trigger points that also fall within your budget, it's going to be helpful for you. Um, when an employee is considering a return to work, this is obviously kind of linked to the absence point of view. But if an employee is looking to return to work and there's potential that any kind of support, adjustments, adaptations could be needed, then that is something you need clinical advice on. That's not a you decision. It's not, you're not medically trained, so it wouldn't be up to you to kind of assess what is the best way of managing somebody's symptoms or what medication they need to be taking or when or what they can and can't do. These are what occupational health specialize in, and this is a clinical speciality in its own right. So that's something that would be prudent to get advice on. You're not going to want to do it for every single return to work. If someone's been off for a cold for 2 days and they're fine again, even I would say a referral to occupational health is an overkill at that stage, save you money. But if somebody's been off for 3 months and they're looking to return to work, it's pretty unlikely they're going to stroll into work at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and everything go back to normal. There's going to be some form of short-term support probably that's required. And then, of course, there's the sort of more extreme end of the spectrum, which is when an employee may or may not be able to do their job uh, in the future for medical reasons. There are two different avenues that can be gone down here. There's obviously capability, which might well result in some form of dismissal or redeployment. There is also for some organisations, such as councils or local government related organisations, there's also the option for ill health retirement sometimes. Very complicated issue. We haven't got it would take me about 3 hours to go through a health retirement in enough detail, so we're not going to talk about it now. But if ever that is something that is relevant to your organisation and you want some help, please do contact me. It's a very challenging process, and certainly something I'm happy to help with to try and ease the load a little bit for you. Um, Thereafter, there's obviously a decision from your point of view. If the employee is no longer able to do their role, what next? Well, you do need some medical guidance in terms of that. If you're making a decision on somebody's employment without having sought medical guidance, you're probably leaving yourself as an employer quite vulnerable and quite exposed. There is plenty of case law, plenty of case law around that as well. Happy to share some with you if you ever need it, but you're probably familiar with these things anyway. So that's six kind of common instances in which you would be looking to make a referral to occupational health. There are, of course, others. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are probably the six most common instances in which you'd be making an OH referral. What would you be looking to achieve from that? And this is the last bit section, by the way. There are, again, lots of reasons why you might be making a referral to occupational health. We've discussed some of the main reasons earlier, but some of the things you might be looking to get out of it. You might be looking to get advice on fitness for work. That could be temporary, it could be permanent, it could be, are they fit to return to work? It could be, are they ever going to be fit to work ever again? But either way, fitness for work is generally what occupational health is there for. Um, are they covered by the Equality Act? You will be well aware of this. It's not a decision for occupational health to make. It is ultimately a decision that only a judge can make in an employment tribunal. However, occupational health can provide very, very good guidance on this matter, and it's guidance that will definitely help you and will definitely be seen very favourably in a tribunal should you ever get to that stage. So just because it's a decision, just because it's not something that occupational health can give definitive guidance on, they can give very helpful guidance on. With that subject, obviously, comes the subject of adjustments. Occupational health are the ones that are best advised to provide information and advice on adjustments. There'll be lots of people that will say, well, the employee knows their medical condition better than anybody else, so we will take guidance from them. You may well be right about that. You may well be right. You might also be wrong. And it might be that the employee is actually making demands over and above what they actually need. If you're not sure about that, occupational health are the ones that are going to be able to give you that clear guidance and determine what they need as opposed to what they want. Fitness to attend meetings or engage in a formal process is extremely important. Just because somebody's off sick doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't or shouldn't be engaging in a process. Ask occupational health that question. It is wonderfully helpful for you because it helps you to continue moving your ER cases along. And it will help. And usually the answer to that is yes, even when somebody is absent. And of course, just managing timescales, keeping things moving in a timely manner is a common outcome. Sometimes things can get a little bit stuck, perhaps as a result of absence or perhaps as a result of a medical issue. So it helps you to manage your timescales. It also helps you to manage timescales for things like when can I expect to return to work? How long is this issue likely to go on for? How long should these adjustments be going on for? Yes, they need to be removed from this part of the work, but is that only for 2 weeks or is that forever? That's really something that you need clinical advice on because otherwise you could be doing more than you need to be doing, or conversely, you might be doing less than you need to be doing and not supporting the employee adequately. Either way, I would definitely be seeking to get that kind of advice within your occupational health report. So that's it. That's a real whistle stop tour as to there's a tribunal ruling from Lee and Maitai here. This demonstrates the importance of using a reputable occupational health clinician, by the way, as well. Just because you're referring to occupational health doesn't necessarily mean you're referring to the right occupational health. So it's an important ruling. There was one OH provider, a very large one. I won't name them because it's not professional, but they are named within the tribunal, who essentially didn't do a proper assessment, didn't write proper advice. The clinician wasn't suitably qualified, and subsequently the employer the tribunal ruled against the employer for not providing the suitable support for the employee. Okay, that's it. That's everything I wanted to go through. It was extremely quick and it was extremely brief, but I hope it gives you a fun little overview as to kind of when and how you might be using occupational health. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I can see Kate has asked a very useful question. Thank you, Kate. How do we start the process for referral? All I can really talk about here is how we work at Smart Clinic. It's really easy. You need to set yourself up an account via our website. As soon as you've got that account, there's a big button there that says services, and you can begin that occupational health referral. The only other thing that you need to do, Kate, is you just need to discuss with the employee that you intend to refer them to occupational health, explain why you're doing that, and just say, keep an eye out for contact from occupational health. At that stage, does the employee have to agree? You're not asking them to agree at this stage. You're just saying, my intention is to refer you to occupational health. At that stage, at least Smart Clinic, occupational health are going to get in touch with your employee, and they're going to request consent from that employee. The employee has a right to refuse consent, so the employee has the right not to engage. If so, clearly the occupational health provider would inform you of that. In such an instance, you would be advised to then proceed without the benefit of occupational health input. Not usually particularly advantageous for the employee, but at least you've demonstrated that you've tried. So does the employee have to agree? Yes, but the way that they would do that is by giving consent directly to the occupational health provider, alternatively refusing consent directly to the occupational health provider. Hopefully that answers your question, Kate. I see the thumbs up, so hopefully that helps. Appreciate we're pushed for time, so if you do want to chat about it a little bit more, I'm happy to give you a much fuller answer to that question too. If the person is underperforming and you're not aware of any health issues, do you have to ask them before saying that they are not performing? There's a really interesting question. I'm slightly out of my depth answering that because I'm not an HR professional, but I would probably say that from a clinical point of view, it would be a useful question to ask to say, is there anything going on, either medically or home-wise, that you believe could be relevant in this process? You don't want to be too blunt or put too much pressure on them, but you do need to give them the opportunity to declare a health condition. So, yes, I think probably in a polite, non intrusive way, asking if there is some kind of medical thing that's going on would definitely be useful. I can't see any other questions in the chat, so hopefully that has been useful. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. It's been fleeting but good fun. If you do have any other questions, if you need any help with anything, please do feel free just to stick a message on HR Ninjas if you'd like everybody to see it, or contact me directly if you'd like it to be a touch more personal, or get in touch with us directly. Until then, thank you ever so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really look forward to working with some of you. Thanks again. Take care.